Well, for 4 weeks, we've been riding this bus together, talking about the different seats on it and the different struggles that we have. And just real talk, we're all going to get a seat on that bus at some point. In fact, some of you wrote it here, and you're in the midst of it. And my hope for the last month or so has been this, that you start to realize you don't have to ride it forever. While it is inevitable you're going to have to climb aboard and you're going to have to go for a few stops, you don't have to live there. You don't have to be buckled into your seat and strapped down and captive to this bus. There are ways to adjust the way we think and adjust who our attention is aimed at that allows us to move and maybe eventually step off of that bus altogether. And just in case you weren't with us, I'd love it if you'd catch up online on our YouTube page. But as quick review, we've talked about a few different in particulars. One would be the struggle of balance. How do we do this life that's so busy where we're going at a breakneck speed and we need a few minutes to just rest and be still? We talked about the struggle of finances. Is there going to be enough left in the account at the end of the month to go maybe get McDonald's or something fun? We talked about the struggle of stress and anxiety and just feeling overwhelmed and kind of stuck. And then last week, the struggle of meaning, especially when it comes to our school or our work. Does that actually matter in the grand scheme of things, even from like a God perspective? Today, I want to wrap it up with something that I know that all of us have dealt with in one phase of our life or another, and possibly even now. And it doesn't even matter if you're a Jesus follower. I think if you're an atheist, you've struggled with this. If you are an agnostic, you have. If you're a brand new follower of Jesus, or you've been doing this for a long time like me, you have had seasons in your life where you have really struggled with doubt. Doubt about God. Doubt about, is he who he says he is? Does he exist at all? And unfortunately, in the church world, sometimes it can feel like a shame-ridden thing. If we're having doubts, we don't talk about it, we don't say it out loud, we're ashamed of it because a good Christian would never doubt. And what happens inevitably is when we doubt long enough, it becomes like the final result for us. It's the end game. We kind of arrive at doubt. We start asking questions that we don't feel like we're getting real great answers to. We start going through struggles in life that we don't feel like we should have to. And then we end up in this place where we go, well, it's probably not true. And he's probably not real. And I'm probably totally done. I think of it like it's just a natural thing. It's not something that makes you bad. It just makes you real. We've all gone through it. We've all been in a season where we go, is God who he says he is? Or is at least is he God like the guy on the platform or the gal on the platform says he is? Because it doesn't seem to line up with my experience, right? There's a gap between what we are promised in God and what actually comes true with God. And so we end up kind of giving up the whole thing. But I want to turn that on its head today. And I'm going to encourage you to think about that idea, this thing that we all struggle with, in a totally, totally different kind of way. And instead of seeing your doubt as a result, I want you to start seeing it as a catalyst. Something that I believe is actually good. When I was a youth pastor for a decade, I regularly would have parents come up to me and freaking out. My kid's asking questions, they're expressing doubt and unbelief and all of these kinds of things, and I don't know what to do, and I would always give them the same answer that I think made them want to punch me in the face. My answer was good. Good, because when they wrestle all the way through it, their faith will be their faith instead of yours. And I don't care if we're a teenager or an adult. I still believe that when we're struggling through some of those things, as long as we are struggling and not giving up, it can be actually the best thing for us to grow in our faith. So I spent some time trying to come up with a bottom line for the day that I think you would remember. So I did my best Dr. Seuss work of my life. And I actually made it rhyme so that it can haunt you for the rest of your life. It goes like this. When in doubt, don't let go. It's the perfect space for faith to grow. If you've ever wondered what I do all week, there it is. But I really believe that's true. I don't think that doubt is the end of the line. I think it's the beginning, if we allow it to be, and if we look at it as an opportunity versus this result or this thing that we're just giving into, because that's sometimes what doubt feels like. We're just giving into it and we're giving up on the whole pursuit. But if we can reframe it a little bit, I think it's in those questions that we'll keep pushing for answers that can make a huge difference for us. And I think on the other side of it, we come out and your faith is yours, not mine. And that's how it should be. Your relationship with Jesus is yours, not mine, that you're just emulating. I actually don't think you should just accept everything I say up here at face value. I think you should go home and chew on it and spit it out if it's not good. I think you should wrestle through the things where you go, that doesn't make sense. And the problem is we all want to pretend like it does, and it doesn't always. Talk more about that in a minute. But we fall into the trap of thinking we got to put on a really good show, especially when we go to church, because that's where all the believers go, and believers don't ever doubt. Believers don't ever not believe, right? Wrong. I've known a lot of believers, and I've been one my whole life. And there's days where we don't believe. And I want to look at a moment where a guy interacted with Jesus and was pretty honest about that fact. He just kind of said the uncomfortable thing. He was vulnerable with Jesus, and Jesus handles it, of course, in a way that Jesus always does, amazingly. But I think it's so important for us to see this because it's a different way of connecting with Jesus than we might think. We think it's like, get it all figured out and get all the answers, and then we'll pray and we'll worship and we'll go to church and we'll be like Jesus and all of that. And I think the invitation from Jesus is, no, come all confused and messed up and backwards and not sure. Come with all of that. I want all of that. So this moment is with a father who has a son, and that son has been possessed by a demon. It's one of these kind of crazy stories. And that has resulted in his son being thrown to the ground and foaming at the mouth and grinding his teeth and becoming stiff. And it says this has been going on for quite some time. And he had actually this dad had gone to Jesus' disciples and asked them to do something about it, and they couldn't. So in desperation, he approaches Jesus with his request. And he explains to Jesus what's been going on. And Jesus' response is not, what kind of dad lets that happen to his kid? His response is not, you must have really done something wrong to have earned this in your house. Or your kid must be so awful. That is not Jesus' response at all. His response is so personal and so good that I hope it's the way we respond to any time someone comes to us with something they're struggling with. He says, how long has this been happening? The dad replied, since he was a little boy, which implies he's not a little boy anymore. He's not a grown man, he's still a boy, but not a little one, which means the answer to how long is too long. If you're a parent in this room and you have had a kid suffer with any kind of illness, whether that's been a physical one, a mental one, an emotional one, being bullied at school, anything like that, you know that even 10 minutes of that is an eternity. It's too long. Even if your kids are grown and you see them lose a job or you see them go through an illness or their kids go through an illness, whatever the case may be, you know that that's so painful that it becomes unbearable. And the longer that you're having to deal with that kind of pain, the easier it becomes to wonder, why me? And why hasn't God done something about this? Why hasn't he fixed this? And you might even trace your steps back and go, I actually didn't do anything wrong to have earned this, and this is being put on me. I think Jesus understands that time is a grief in and of itself. We might be grieving the loss of a job or a parent or whatever for a time, but time itself, how long will I have to grieve this? And I think that's why Jesus asked this question. I think he understands that this situation is going to drive the father of this little boy to really question who God is and whether or not there's any part of that God that's good. Because this has been his all-consumed life for so long, dealing with this challenge, getting no help, finding no answers. And so Jesus understands the humanity in that. And I think it's easy for us to lose sight of it. When we come to Jesus with whatever it is that we're struggling with, we assume he does not understand the strife and the pain and the angst and the things that are real for us. And he does. He would not have asked this question if he didn't. He would have started somewhere else, but he starts with the grief of time. And the father's answer could have been just too long. He says, since he was a little boy. And then the father asks very simply, and it's such an example to us when we find ourselves in the midst of that. He says, have mercy on us and help us if you can. There's so much in there that's so good. He says first, have mercy on us, which back in the day was a way of saying, will you meet our need? Obviously, Jesus has been told what the need is. The Father has expressed that, and will you do something about this? We've heard that you turn water into wine. We've heard that you've made blind men see and lame people walk, and there's even rumor that you raised somebody from the dead. Like, can you meet our need and do what only God could do in this situation? Because we've gone to priests, and we've gone to your disciples, and we've gone to doctors, and nothing's fixing it. Can you have mercy on us and help us? But the best part of this is actually the last 3 words. If you can. That's bold. And that's honest. When was the last time you prayed for something big in your life? And you were honest with your doubt in the prayer? Because that's what this dad is saying. He's expressing his doubt. I'm not totally sure God can fix this. I'm not totally sure that you, Jesus of Nazareth, are really who everybody says you are. He says, if you can, I don't know if I've ever prayed that. God, heal so-and-so, help me if you can. Because I was taught to believe you don't ever say that. You don't ever doubt God. You just have to believe. And the bigger you believe and the bolder you believe, the more obligated he is to do what you want him to do. That's not how this dad is at all, though. And here's reality, and this might not be true for you, so I'm just going to say for me. There have been a lot of times where I may not have said it out loud, but I felt it inside. If you can, God. I really wish you would. But I'm not sure you can. And I'm just going to say what my kids would say when they would read Jesus' response to this. It is a gangster answer. The dad says, have mercy on us, help us if you can. And this is what Jesus says. What do you mean if I can? What do you mean if I can? Don't you know who I am? Haven't you heard the stories? And then he goes on to say, anything is possible if a person believes. So if you believe in me, then it's not a question of can. And this is the hard part, because it really hinges more on the guy's belief, according to Jesus, less about Jesus' ability. And it's way more about the guy's belief. And I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't pause and say this is one of those sentences in the scriptures that a lot of people like me have used to manipulate and abuse people. And sometimes we can read it and we can believe things that aren't promised in there. And then we get angry and ultimately doubt God because it didn't go the way that we thought it should because of how we read what we read. Jesus does not say everything goes right or the way that people want when they believe. He doesn't. He says anything is possible. He doesn't say everything is certain. He doesn't say everything is for sure. And this goes back to some of the things we've talked about over the summer around prayer is we sometimes think that it's us obligating God to do for us, but it's really the whole reason for prayer is to get us in line with Him. And so Jesus says, recognize anything is possible, but you've got to believe. And your belief does not obligate me to do anything. So I think for me, I have to stop praying as if it does. And I grew up at least in a church where it was like, just believe, just believe, just believe. And I started thinking that guaranteed me something, but it doesn't. What Jesus is saying is belief is your responsibility, but it's not a warranty. It's the thing that you are responsible for in the dynamic with God. You are to believe. He will handle it from there. Anything's possible, but nothing is guaranteed. There's no warranty. Like you get a warranty on stuff you buy. They want to warranty everything now, right? Buy a pair of socks. They're like, would you like to buy the warranty? And the reason that we go for stuff like that is because we just want to know it's going to be there. Even if the one we bought doesn't work, they're going to send us another one or they're going to fix it because we need it to be reliable. The warranty makes us feel warm and cozy because it's going to show up. And that's what we want to believe belief in God is. That it's this guarantee that it's going to go the way we need it to. But Jesus never, and Scripture never says that. Because He's king and not me. He's in charge and He's the author, and I'm not. Is anything possible? Yes, because He can do anything. And He is 100% the right person for me to go to with what my needs are and my struggles are. But we've got to get away from the idea that that's an automatic fix. Because in your doubt and in your struggle might be the variables that are ultimately going to help your faith grow. And if God were to shortchange that, He's going to shortchange your faith in the long run. I don't like that, but I've learned that that's true. So the Father hears what Jesus says, and His response is amazing. Because it's so, so honest. This is what we read. The Father instantly cried out, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. And that feels like, how can you say both of those things? It's like talking out of both sides of your mouth. I do believe, but I don't believe. Help me with the unbelief. But we do this all the time. We believe and we don't believe. We believe maybe verbally and outwardly, but inwardly, we're struggling through the doubt. And I love that the dad's like, okay, so what I need your help because I'm really struggling with this. My kid is in really bad shape. And this has been going on for a really long time. And I am starting to question if it's ever going to get better or if it's ever going to turn around. He says, so help me with my unbelief. What an amazing thing for us to embrace if we started saying to God over and over again, help me with my unbelief. I don't know if you've ever prayed that. Because again, there's this thing in us that feels like we shouldn't pray that. Because then God won't answer, right? If we tell Him we're doubting, well, then He's going, well, if you're going to doubt, I'm not helping you. But what if we started going to Him with our doubt? With that thing that gets in the way of everything else. I've learned this to be true. So I've gone to Bible school and seminary, and I have degrees, and I'm supposed to know all this stuff, but can I tell you the truth? I've learned more in my doubts and struggles than anything in school about God. Like, my theology has been bettered, not because I sat under a professor, but because I sat in the middle of struggle. My hero growing up was my grandpa. To me, he was the closest thing to Jesus still walking around on earth. He was just an amazing guy. And when I was 16 years old, they found out he had gallbladder cancer, something today that would be no problem, but it killed him in 3 months. I remember I had just gotten my driver's license. My dad and I had just gone to see Space Jam. This is how vivid it is in my head. And we came home to my grandma's house where my mom was, and he was gone. And that was the first time in my life where I really wondered, was God real? I remember walking around my grandparents' house outside. It was dark, and I was kind of shouting at God. Like, he's the best of humanity. Why would you take him? And he's the one teaching me more about you than anybody else. Why would you take him? Unless you're either not there or you have no idea what you're doing. And then in the 30 years since he passed, watching my grandma have to do life by herself, it just doesn't make sense to me. There's doubt consistently that comes around in that. And then when I was about 20 years old, the church that I had grown up at split. And if you've been around a church that's split, you know it's horrifying. You watch people that are supposed to love each other and are supposed to be an example of Jesus fight and yell and scream, and ultimately decide they can't even stand to be in the same room anymore. It's really difficult when your parents leave and go start another church and you stay. And I remember thinking, what are we doing this for? It doesn't make any real difference. We act just like everybody else. My unbelief came in circumstances over and over again, that even though I grew up in a Christian home, and even though I'd gone to church every week of my life, and I'd been in Awana and everything, and then I got to be an adult. And when the marriage I loved ended, and I didn't want it to, that was almost the nail in the coffin. I remember standing on the street corner, probably looking totally insane, of this one particular street corner in Gurnee where I live, screaming at the top of my lungs, "This is not fair. And this is what I get for a life of following you? I don't need all the fingers on one hand to count the number of times where I felt like I had really sinned." And that's not to tell you that I was great. It was to tell you those moments where you go, what is he doing? Are real no matter who you are, even for a pastor. And I had 2.5 years where I wasn't working at a church. And I had to struggle my way through questioning, was I all wrong? Had I given my life to something that was total hogwash? Because it didn't make my life better. In some ways, it felt like it had made it worse. And then I realized it was in that pain and in those questions that I could pray a really simple prayer. God, help me with my unbelief. I'm having a hard time believing right now. I'm having a hard time believing that you're who you said you were. I'm having a hard time believing that you really love me. I'm having a hard time believing in an all-loving, all-powerful God that lets bad things happen to good people. I'm really struggling with that. Those were the best classroom of my life. those moments and the moments that you're facing are the best classrooms for you to learn what it actually means to have faith. Because sometimes faith isn't just this belief and I'll go jump off of something without looking. It's I have faith that God can handle my questions. I have faith that God can handle my anger. I have faith that he can handle my honesty and my vulnerability, and I don't have to fake it with him. I can tell him that I'm doubting him. And his response is, come closer. Let me show you. My faith is probably stronger than it's ever been in my life on the other side of real doubt. Doubt wasn't the end, it was the beginning. And it might be for you too. So my encouragement to you, like the dad did in this interaction with Jesus, is acknowledge your doubt. Don't pretend it's not there. And here's the good news. Whether you've been coming to Great Lakes for a while or you just wandered in here today, this is one of our favorite things, to be real. This is the kind of church we want to be part of. We don't want to be a community where you have to walk in and pretend like everything's good and you've got all the answers and it all makes sense. Because for nobody in this room, if they're honest, does it always make sense? For nobody in this room, if they're honest, would they say they've never been on the struggle bus with any of them that we've talked about throughout this series? But I can tell you, for everybody in this room, they would say, in the midst of your doubt, don't let go. Because it might be on the other side of it that your faith is bigger. Thus the rhyme. When in doubt, don't let go. It's actually the perfect space for your faith to grow. And it may not be instant. Not once in any of those moments in my own life that I share with you where I was in pain, did God just make it better when I cried out to him? Because he wasn't going to shortchange my growth. And it was that third one was a long, hard walk. But I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it. Because my relationship with God today is better because of it. My learning that I could be honest with him was worth it. So, wherever you're at, whether you walked in feeling really good, like I believe, I don't have any doubt, or you got a ton of them, maybe even you walked in here, you don't even consider yourself a Christian because you've got so many questions. Don't allow your doubt to be the end game. Don't allow it to be the last stop. Don't allow it to be the final thing. Don't allow it to be a result. Reframe it and understand it as a beginning. Because here's what happened. When the dad was honest with Jesus and said, help me with my unbelief, Jesus healed his son. He didn't say, well, once you go figure it out, and once you've got better faith and you can believe better, then I'll consider helping you. It was in the midst of his doubt. And his faith grew. And it's not recorded, but I would guess that dad and that boy followed Jesus everywhere he went from that point on. Because they were living proof that you can show up with God honestly and God will do something with that. So whether you're doubting or you're believing, here's the best prayer that you can pray. Help me with my unbelief. Even if you walked in here like, I don't believe any of this, I dare you to pray. God, if you're real, help me with my unbelief. Jesus, if you're who you said you were, help me with my unbelief because I don't believe it. If you're going through a divorce or a job change or struggles with your kids or just any of the other struggles that we've talked about in this series, I encourage you, I dare you to go to God and just say, help me with my unbelief. He's not going to turn back at you and go, get it together and then I will. He's going to say, lean in closer, and I'll show you. So here's the deal. There's no shortage of seats on the struggle bus. Whether you struggle with meaning or finances or stress or balance or doubt, there's a place for you on the bus, but you don't have to stay there. It doesn't have to be your definition of life. It will have to be a part of it at times, but it doesn't have to be the defining thing. You can turn all of those around, and that's kind of been the goal for this whole series. So we said things like, if you're struggling with meaning, then we think you should get another trusting hour on your calendar. If you're struggling with stress, you should retreat to Jesus. And if you're struggling with doubt, you should be alert and honest and vulnerable with him and let him know. This is what I'm actually feeling. Just wanted you to know. Help me with my unbelief. So because you can get off and get back on and get off and get back on, you may find yourself struggling again down the road, and we wanted to help you with that. We wanted to give you something, kind of a token from our whole conversation that might help. So on your way out today, our guest experience is going to hand you a bus pass, and it looks like this, and we encourage you to keep that in your purse or in your wallet or in your cup holder of your car or somewhere that's accessible, because on the back side is everything that was just on the screen. Retreat to Jesus. Be honest with your doubt. See money as a means to an end, not an end itself. So that when those days come, you don't have to do it alone. Which is really where I want to end our time together. I'm going to invite my buddy Carson to come back out, because here's what I know to be true. I would not have made my way through any of the struggles that I shared with you or any of those doubts if I had tried to do it by myself. I just wouldn't. And here's why. I'm not designed or made to get through any of that by myself. I can't, not because I'm not good, but because I'm just not made that way. And neither are you. And that's why we're always encouraging people to take a step into community. And we have a great environment that we call short-term groups. And I want Carson to share a little bit more about it with you, and I hope that you'll take that step in September to join a group so that you don't have to go through any of this by yourself, because you're not made for it, and we can do better together. So Carson's going to share that with you, and then we'll close in prayer. Thanks, man.
Thank you, man. Hey, I just want to share one thought, and then I'll pray, and we'll get out of here together, is the first round of short-term groups that we did here at Great Lakes Church. I had a ton of anxiety about it. I wasn't really sure what to expect. We had about 60 people join us, and so we had a bunch of different tables and all people in different walks of life, and at the end, you get this opportunity where you say, hey, are we going to keep meeting? From here, are we going to choose to do life together, kind of like Josh was talking about? And the two tables that chose to, one was Wyatt's table, so a bunch of people just like in their 20s, maybe early 30s. And then another table was a bunch of my friends who were in their 60s and 70s. And the reason I think it's a perfect picture is because regardless of where you fall on the spectrum of life, I think there is a longing in us for connection, for people to figure it out with, to ask the big questions. And short-term groups are just the beginning of that exploration. And so we do everything we can to make it an easy environment where you can just take a baby step. And I just want to urge you to actually think about doing something. I think it's really easy to let this stuff roll off our back or say it's not for me, that's for somebody else. But what if it was for you? And you're the only person who can answer that question. I can't sign you up, but I would love to see you there if you choose to. You can find it all at greatlakechurch.com/groups. Thanks so much for hanging out. Thanks for letting me share a little bit of my heart for short-term groups. I'm a believer in groups because groups changed my life. It's literally the beginning of my story. I'd be happy to share it with you if you want to hear it. But I'm going to pray us out, and let's go into the week. Jesus, you are good. And you are with us on the struggle bus of life. I know that everybody in this room falls into one of three camps. I know people either feel like they are in the thick of the struggle, They either feel like they have just recently gotten off the bus and are maybe going to come up for air for a bit, or people can sense an impending struggle. And all three of those stories matter the same to you. And all three of those stories you walk with us in. And so I pray for my friends that when it's time to retreat to you, when it's time to just trust you fully, when it's time to address our doubt and our discouragement, all the things that we covered through this series, that you would make yourself known to my friends in the room. And that we would have the opportunity to not tackle struggle solo, at the very least to keep you alongside us, but then maybe even to invite somebody else into the struggle with us. Because our best chance at knowing you and seeing your face is often through the people that you've made. And so I pray that over the life of my friends. God, thank you for this community and for what you're doing and what you will do in the coming season. And in your name, amen.